My name is Allison Page. I'll be presiding this morning. I'm also the president of this organization for the year. For those of you who are new to this organization or visiting because we have such a fabulous speaker this morning, I'll kind of walk through what we do at each phase of this service. Who'd like to ring the opening bell? All right. We like to have the youngest is usually chosen. Yeah, can she reach it? You might have to jump. 1, 2, 3. Give it a ding. Give it a bang. Perfect. All right. So the order of our service this morning, I'm going to grab this. Order of service is we light the chalice. We have a pause where we greet one another. There's usually new people here to introduce yourselves. Then we have a session where we do joys and concerns. And then Prescott Bergh is going to present to us on forgiveness and resilience in Vietnam. In the Unitarian Universalist Association, there's a theme for every month. The theme for February is resilience. In March will be the theme paying attention. Then we'll have a song and announcements and closing words, and we always end with treats and coffee in the kitchen. So, February theme, as I said, is embracing resilience. In UU, love is at the center of everything. Love is at the center, and our 6 principles are interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and justice. And then the conversations that we have weekly usually pull in each of these principles, or some of them some weeks, others other weeks. The chalice lighting. Who would like to light the chalice? While Callan does the honors of lighting the chalice, we can read these words together. Forgiveness does not relieve someone of the responsibility for what they have done. Forgiveness does not erase accountability. We are not responsible for what breaks us, but we can be responsible for what puts us back together again. By Desmond Tutu. Now we'll pause for a moment and greet one another. Okay, let's break it up. Could you ring the bell again? Somebody like to do that? All right. Okay. There'll be more time for greetings and conversation following the presentation. Now it's time for joys and concerns. This is a tradition of ours that people come up and take a rock and drop it into the water and share a joy or a concern. Who'd like to start? All right, Callan. And Mary, you can get in line. Right here. Callan will show you the way.
So today is my second session in D&D because I started
Can you
it last
speak
week.
louder?
Today is my second session in D&D. I started it last week.
All right.
I would really like to have some feelings of love, compassion, healing for my friend Jennifer, who was just diagnosed with cancer.
Oh.
So if we can she doesn't know exactly where the treatment is going to be, but if we can just hold her in light, that would be good.
Okay. You going to share one, Juliet?
This is rather fitting. Is anybody getting choked by the incense here? Someone saw me carry it in and thought Catholic Church. And we're not doing that here, but Prescott will explain the significance. My concern is some very good friends of ours had their house burned last night. So they've been to the Unitarian Fellowship, Ed Krause and Janelle Ludwig Krause. And so they are fine. Their property is damaged, and they would just like to be held in your thoughts. They don't need help right now. They're in shock and things like that. So if you want to get anything communicated to them, feel free to reach out to Prescott or I. Will be sure to share your willingness to help or your thoughts or whatever. So just keep
Many
them
of
in your
you may
thoughts.
know Janelle as the leader of GROW.
Yeah, they might. She's the our co-ED
Yep.
of Grassroots Organizing, Western Wisconsin. So, thank you.
Special rock for Mary. I have not seen Mary for decades, or maybe I saw you and I don't remember. She has helped me heal in ways that she didn't even know, and I caught her up today. She shared a book with a mutual friend 21 years ago that ended up making it to me, and I have returned it, and the book continues on, but Mary started a chain. So thank you.
Okay. Other joys and concerns? Any others? If not, I'll put the large rock in for all the joys and concerns that go unspoken this morning. So now we have a real treat. Prescott Bergh, who is going to come to the podium here, and I'll have him introduce himself, who he is, where he's been, and why he's here to talk to us about this topic today. The title of his talk this morning is Forgiveness and Resilience in Vietnam, 50 years after the American War. So Prescott, come on up. Would you like the mic?
Good morning, everyone. I realized getting ready for this, I've been retired for like 10 or 12 years, and I haven't given a presentation since I retired from corporate life. So this is quite it was quite an experience. Like, what is this bicycle? Can I still ride it? You know. I wanted to wish you, first of all, Happy New Year. This is actually started on Sunday. It's Tet. Well, you may have heard of the Tet Offensive from back from the days of the Vietnam War. It's the New Year's time in Vietnam and China. And it's related, like our Easter, it floats according to the moon and the sun and all other sorts of things. But this is an idea of when we got to Vietnam, we didn't know it was New Year's when we arrived. So talk a little bit why we went to Vietnam and how it was. So we're of the age that I didn't go to Vietnam as a soldier. I missed the draft by about 1.5 years or 2 years, but our family was very involved in the helping people who were AWOL going to Canada, sort of an underground railroad. Remember feeling as a kid, our phone was probably tapped, and we would farm people out to friends who were not as politically active or exposed for people to stay with them. But I think beyond that, those of us of a certain age, we grew up with, every night on the news was the body count. I mean, imagine every night seeing a body count on the television and pictures of rows of dead bodies and napalm being dropped on children and just incredible upheaval within the United States as well. And really nobody knew exactly why we were fighting this war. And it was supposedly against communist expansion into Southeast Asia from China, which was the big bugaboo at the time. But it was the demon that everyone was afraid of, maybe the shadow side of ourselves. But New Year's in Vietnam is celebrated with sweet green rice. So the rice fields haven't matured yet, but they harvest the rice and they make this sort of sweet rice blocks or candies kind of. They're not really very sweet, like a lot of Japanese sweets if you've ever had those. But it's really to symbolize the new year and rebirth and the starting of the new agricultural year. So it was all over the place. This woman on your left was our guide, Emma Vu, who this is our first day in Hanoi, and showing us little green rice cakes. And then on the left is just a woman who's selling on the street, a street vendor, selling the sweet green rice as part of the celebration. So this was almost exactly 2 years ago today. So a little history, or just, I think America, after the war against Vietnam, or the Viet Cong, the communists from the north, we pretty much abandoned the field and moved on, and really, I think as a culture, never really processed it. And so I think if you're younger than Juliet and I, you may not even have ever thought about Vietnam necessarily. But it's Southeast Asia, it's south of China, east of Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. It goes from, the northern part is about the same latitude as southern Florida, and the southern part is about 8 degrees from the equator, so it's starting to be tropical. It's about 1,000 miles north to south, so if you maybe are more familiar with Europe and Norway, it's about the same size as Norway. 100 million people. It was much higher population density than I expected. About 85% of the population are ethnic Viet people, but there are 54 ethnic groups. Hill tribes, I mean, we're probably familiar with the Hmong people who came here because they fought alongside the US, the CIA, against the communists, and then were forced to flee. But we started up in the northern part up in Hanoi, which was the capital of North Vietnam, and we worked our way all the way down to the Mekong Delta in the south. Most of it was by bus, but we did take 2 flights because it's just such a long country. We were there for 20 days with 15 other Americans, and we did do it was the first time Juliet and I have ever done a tour, and we went with a group called Overseas Adventure Travel. And I have to say, we've always been independent travelers. We've traveled in lots of other parts of the world, but I have to say, Vietnam was pretty daunting, and we're really glad that we did take a tour because we had exposure and access to people and places that we would have never have known existed. So on the right here is the old imperial palace in the town of Hue, which is kind of in central Vietnam. I think the thing that David and I were talking about before we started is, the Vietnamese culture is thousands of years old. And I think America, our sort of naivete and aggressive, actions against communism really walked into a briar patch that we had no idea what we were getting into. Because when you understand how long the culture is there and the perspective on time and multiple lifespans, all of a sudden you realize it just, we were just very underprepared and ununderstanding. So we just found a very vibrant multicultural society with multiple tribes, multiple religions, and nomadic people. We met people in the central mountain town of Dalat who had been relocated to sort of the suburbs of this city, and they had just moved there previously, living in nomadic villages where at night one of the men would have to stand guard against the tigers. That was their biggest fear, was tigers at night. So it's incredibly diverse, everything from that to the town of Da Nang, which feels like you're in Miami Beach. It's a huge tourist town for people from China, skyscrapers, big beach, the whole thing. So incredibly diverse. Part of what I want to touch on briefly is the history of French colonialism, because part of the reason the U.S. I think failed to understand is the same reason maybe the French failed to understand. They were there for 100 years, basically, and they, basically were there to extract resources, and treated people, as most colonial empires do, pretty poorly. And I know this is a little harsh, but galettes and guillotines, they brought French cuisine, things like banh mi, which is a baguette with Asian-inspired fillings. And there are some French bakeries and things like that. But they also brought the guillotine to execute the people who were opposed to their colonial power. So it was the Vietnamese really fought against the French for 100 years. They eventually defeated them after World War II. And then they basically were forced to leave. The reason the U.S. got involved, you think, well, so the French lost the colony, so what? But the person who the French sort of put in place, Diem, there was a peace accord when the North and South quit fighting in 1954. They were supposed to have elections. And the puppet, so to speak, of the West refused to have elections. And so he decided to go to war against the communists instead of having an election. And sounds a little bit like what we're maybe going through here almost. 80% of the population basically supported getting rid of the colonial power. And so we fought a war, the French fought a war for a long time, we fought a war for 10 years, fighting against basically 80% of the population, because we didn't understand that really they were opposing colonialism, not communism. It was really fascinating. As an example, under the French in 1938, literacy rates were 20%. And when we were there, if you're under 30 years old, the literacy rate is like 99%. And for the population as a whole, it's 96%. Which maybe exceeds the US, I'm not sure, it's pretty close. Anyway, so, this guillotine in one of the museums we visited. You can see the colonial French architecture, if you've ever been to Europe or French, maybe Montreal. So the U.S. got involved. We fought for 10 years. 2 million Vietnamese were killed, and just pretty incredible slaughter of both Americans and the people of Vietnam and the neighboring countries of Laos and Cambodia. Let's see, 1 second. So why did incredible firepower, we had every modern armament just like going into Iraq or Iran or Afghanistan or a lot of other places where we've tried to impose our will. Why did it not work? I really think it comes down to the cultural philosophies of Vietnam. And I've made a few copies of sort of called the three teachings. I don't have enough for everybody, sorry, you'll have to share, I can get you send something to you. But Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism are sort of the three teachings, they call them in Vietnam. And they really shaped the culture over the last maybe 2,000 years. And they share a tremendous amount of overlap in terms of their thoughts and behavior. Confucianism in some ways is sort of a philosophy of government, but the emphasis of virtue through self-cultivation and communal effort, benevolence, propriety, wisdom, and sincerity, whereas Taoism is really about following the way, is the way they might describe it, but they also practice self-cultivation and harmonious existence. And Buddhism also has very similar ethical principles in terms of trying to avoid stealing, killing, lying, sexual misconduct, intoxicants, and training the mind to gain insight and wisdom. So all three of these religious or philosophical backgrounds informs the people of Vietnam in terms of when they were facing this common oppressor. And I think really, if the Pentagon had understood that when we decided to go to war there, we might have changed our mind. And we saw so many examples of that. The other thing that struck me about, I have a handout, take a look at more of those three religions or afterwards. The other thing that struck me is I spent time in Eastern Europe right after the fall of the Soviet Union, and under Soviet-style communism, religions were really suppressed. I was in a Lutheran church in Latvia in 1992, 6 months after the Soviet Union had folded, and the ministers were just coming out of hiding, basically. They had been persecuted under the whole Soviet era, such that our interpreter in Latvia was forced to go to the church, and if they saw parents of any of her students attending church, then they would lose their jobs, and et cetera, et cetera. So as opposed to that, in Vietnam, tremendous religious variety, and under their form of communist government, really not suppressed at all. In fact, turn to the opposite. Some of you may remember a famous photo from Life magazine of a monk self-immolating, burning himself to death in Saigon, in southern city. And I always thought that was related to opposition to American involvement in the war, but it turns out that it was because Diem, the puppet governor, president of South Vietnam, was Catholic and was suppressing Buddhism. And so that monk was was demonstrating his opposition to religious persecution. So just a fascinating stories of religious tolerance. So this is, again, some examples. On the left is, I don't know exactly what you call it, if you call it a totem or an altar. It was a very cool looking wild sculptural thing in front of a Catholic church. So, apparently in Vietnam, the Catholics were much more open to tribal folk religions and integrating that into their practice in order to sway people into their religion. And on the right is a form of religion that I'd never heard of called, Cao Dai, yeah, which was fascinating because this was started about 100 years ago in 1920, and the founder of this religion was trying to include all the major religions. So on the back of the altar, I don't think you can see it in this picture, there was Buddha and Jesus and Confucius and all these folks, and it was fascinating. So the one of the things we saw common to expression of religiosity and these principles were altars. And the reason we have up here is an altar similar to what we would have seen in Vietnam. So you have fruits, you have pineapples, longans, mangoes, dragon fruit, coconut, all these kind of things as an expression that was brought to the temples and left for the monks. Or alternately, one of the places that we went, I think I have a video of, given out to the people who attend the ceremonies afterwards. So it's again just some examples of some of the religious shrines. The one on the right is the temple to the monks who self-immolated in protest of the repression of Buddhism. So ancestor worship, it was so stunning. Every place we went, people's individual houses, businesses. In fact, Juliet and I were at the Asian food store in Woodbury the other day, and we noticed there's a little altar as you walk in, high 10. It used to be the Byerly's in east of St. Paul, and they have a little altar as you walk in there. You may or may not have noticed it if you've been there. But and this fruit on the right, the finger, we tried to bring one of those. They're called Buddha's hand. They're kind of a citrus that you don't actually eat, but they're really cool looking. So in terms of resilience, this is an example of this fellow on the left used to be a fairly major entrepreneur. He had multiple ceramics factories, and after the communist win of the war, they took all his property. They took his factories, they took his house. Some of his relatives escaped and moved to Europe. He was wily, I guess you'd say. He hid his gold in a well, and he left it there for like 10 or 15 years until he felt it was safe to retrieve it. And from that stash of cash, he was able to start rebuilding his life. And this lamp he's holding is one that he was commissioned to make by the government when President Obama visited Vietnam. And he actually got to give a replica of this lamp to Obama. So talk about resilience, from being successful to being persecuted to really getting back on your feet. Just another altar to Ho Chi Minh on the left, and on the right to his study, where I guess if you compare it to the sort of ostentatiousness of the current White House, you can see a pretty difference in perspective. So, respect for elders, and my apologies to Juliet for maybe not respecting her enough, but the first question that our guide would ask every elder person we talked to on the street was, "How old are you?" Which, in our culture, you don't usually ask people, especially women, how old they are. But there, it's the first question you ask to help you establish sort of the level of respect that person should be shown, which is really, really fascinating. This woman on the right is a betel nut vendor, so she has betel nut and a little bit of calcium, and you put it in a pandan leaf and you chew it, and Juliet's throat started to constrict, and it was not a pleasant experience, I think, but it's a common stimulant that you see a lot of older women, especially, they'll have black teeth from chewing this for decades, I guess. And another elder this woman rides her bicycle into Hanoi every morning with her pole of vegetables to measure, and she walks around and sells them on the street until she's done, and then she goes home. But she does that every day. And she's, I don't know, probably 60, I guess? 80? Okay. So it's really, there is no social safety net. You work until you die, but it's just fascinating, all the interplays between how these principles, these three-way teachings interact with how everyone works. So our guide purchase the rest of her vegetables so she could go home. The other principles is about family, and on the left is the Hill tribe family that had to worry about tigers, now resettled in this pretty tough cement house in this little village near Dalat that the woman is weaving on the floor, and I guess I can't say whether it's better or worse than what they had previously, but definitely still very coherent family. And on the right is our guide, Emma, and her father. And just to give you an idea of the dynamics that are happening, Emma grew up in a small rice-growing village near Hanoi in the north. She was expected just to get married and have kids. Instead, she went off to university. She married a man from the south. Their families had been opposite sides of the war. Her mother-in-law still will not refer to Ho Chi Minh City as Ho Chi Minh City. She still calls it Saigon because she still resents the fact that the communists changed the name. But she's, sort of the new generation of Vietnamese women who are really much more independent and educated. And when we got to Saigon, there's still a tremendous cultural difference, I would say, and economic difference between the north and the south. Saigon and Hanoi are still both very big cities, but in the south, Saigon, Ho Chi Minh City is, I would say, much more dynamic. You can still see sort of the capitalist Western influence, 50 years on. It's still quite impressive. Education is really important. This is a primary school we stopped at in Hanoi. Let's see. And, the kids are very well cared for. That's something that I also saw when I was in Hungary right after the Soviet Union dissipated. Education is really important, and primary child care and even child care right after birth, was mostly offered free by the state. And so that's one thing that I think, they really have done much better than we have in the West, where child care expenses are astronomical if you can find it. Right? It's just another shot of the entrance to the school. So community harmony, this is another piece this is a Buddhist thing, but this is the effects of the law of karma. So on the left, it's if you promote Buddhism and respect towards the Buddha, in your next life, you'll get to heaven and have great enlightenment. Whereas if you cause harm to a monk or a nun on the bottom left panel, then you'll spend eternal or 1,000 years in hell. So it's a carrot and stick approach. And I think that's one of the things that I don't know if I'm correct, but one of my determinants is that if you're thinking about your life as a chapter in multiple lives, as opposed to just, well, I'm either going to go to hell or to heaven, as sort of the Christian Western approach would be, you maybe have more impetus to think about the longer term. And I don't know, haven't studied these religions extensively, but that's what it appeared to me, is that there was a longer time frame in terms of considering your actions and your interaction with your community and your society. And the other thing I wanted to show you is this is laughing yoga. This is our second morning in Hanoi. So we just showed up. Our guide Emma knew that this happened every morning at 6:30 in front of the very high-end department store where they sell Rolexes and things. These people didn't know we were coming, but we showed up, maybe 10 Americans, and they were doing their laughing yoga on the street. And they just welcomed us right into the group and, didn't really need words to figure out what was going on. And it was just so welcoming. I mean, I think this is a city that 50 years ago we were bombing with B-52s and trying everything we could do to destroy them. This is just after the laughing yoga. So maybe something we could try here sometime. And this is another example. This, again, we were there 2 years ago exactly to this week, and during Tet, the New Year. And this is a community, again, where we were actually going to this village, Bat Trang, to visit the ceramics factory. But we happened to get off the bus and we're walking down the street, and this temple was having a celebration. So we went in and watched this priest or nun singing, and then afterwards they came out and they had this big display of, again, like here, a small altar of rice, and they have pretend paper money that you burn as part of your ritual for bringing wealth into the next year. And on the lower right, you see a tub, this green tub that's full of eels. This is right on the Red River. And after the ceremony, before they did anything else, took the tub of eels and they walked it down a long stairway and put the eels back in the river. So again, it was part of the gift to the eels as part of the rebirth in the spring. And then they invited us to share in sort of the distribution of the goods. Yeah. Yeah. So it was really, the welcoming, the openness, and the lack of any. I know my father served in the Navy in World War II, and his whole life he had a really hard time dealing with anything from Germany because his ship had gotten strafed, and it was just, he never was really able to let go of that and have that kind of forgiveness. And to see it so completely in Vietnam was really remarkable. The other thing I wanted to talk about was humility, I guess, and rice culture. Probably, if you were alive during the war, you remember all these pictures of rice fields and soldiers walking along the dikes between the rice fields. Rice is still the primary food source, rice and vegetables. But the percentage of population that's in agriculture has been reduced from maybe 75% or 80% during the war to about 38%. Mostly women that do the rice production. And we visited, this was on a kind of a cold day, it was probably 50 degrees and kind of drizzly, and Emma just had the bus pull over on the side, and we walked out on this dike to talk to these women. And in terms of gratitude, so here's people doing manual work, which most of us probably would not care to do in the drizzle and 50 degrees. But their gratitude was that their life had improved because now they had waterproof boots and warm socks, they had raincoats, they had warm clothes, so they could do their work in relative comfort. So it was so fascinating. They're still doing the same work, but the gratitude for the, what we would think is almost incremental improvements was really evident. And that was just so fascinating to me. And then when we got down to the Mekong Delta in the south, the Mekong River Delta, they were harvesting rice because there's such a difference in latitude when they can plant the rice and when it's harvested. So here they're doing mechanical harvesting with a Kubota combine. Very small combine, a tenth of the size of the ones that we have here in the US, but it's built for the scale of their agriculture and obviously improves their efficiency tremendously compared to cutting all by hand. And rice is so central to every meal we had. You had cooked rice, but you had rice paper sheets like you have here. You fold things inside. There's every imaginable and unimaginable type of rice dish. I think humility is the other thing. We were fortunate to visit 2 monasteries. One was, they ran an orphanage for children. And the other one, Juliet, I'm trying to remember the other one. A school. So this one, we had lunch at this monastery, and I just want to pay attention. This is the sidewalk within the monastery, and I just thought it was so beautiful. This is broken ceramics that have been repurposed in this beautiful way to build a new walking path. And I just thought that's such a great perspective on taking something that's broken and making it new again, and that kind of perspective. So this was in the city of Hue, which is in the center of Vietnam. And finally, I think forgiveness. So about 25 or 30 miles west of Ho Chi Minh City, Saigon, they had built these tunnels underground. There's a special type of clay in the riverbank there that once exposed to air, it hardens. And so they built these incredible networks of tunnels. I mean, hundreds of miles of tunnels. Multi-layer, very tiny. If you can imagine walking in a tunnel the size of this little table here, not any higher, not any wider. And so it was so well hidden. This fellow here is about to go down and put this little cover on top of the leaves. So they could go down and live in these. They had workshops, they had hospitals, they had everything they needed. In fact, they were so well hidden that the U.S. actually built a base on top of one of these big complexes, and they had no idea that they were right on top. The fellow reason I have the picture on the right, somebody, they had medical care, because I'll get to that in a second. The other thing, in terms of resilience, this is a sandal. And you think, oh, well, great, it's a sandal. It's made out of old tires. So maybe if you've been in Mexico or Central America, you've seen similar footwear made from recycled inner tubes and tires. But this sandal leaves the same track going forward or backward. So if you're being followed, nobody knows which way you're going. I thought it was so ingenious, so resilient, and making use of resources that were available, and tricking your enemies at the same time. But this is, I think, the Thich Nhat Hanh. I didn't know whether he was really well known here, and maybe he wasn't really a thing in Vietnam, but we saw his book in bookstores there as well. And I think this quote, letting go gives us freedom, and freedom is the only condition for happiness. If in our heart we still cling to anything, anger, anxiety, or possessions, we cannot be free. And we saw that so clearly, so many ways. These are some generals who had been their South Vietnamese were fighting against the U.S. war. The fellow on the left actually spent 6 months in one of these tunnels because he had been so badly injured. And if you can imagine spending 6 months in a little tunnel like that, with centipedes and snakes and everything else that live in holes like that. And he invited us to his house for lunch, 15 Americans. I mean, it was just remarkable. Here's a little video. I don't know if you can hear it.
And also get injured in the head. And
Can we turn the sound up at all?
Right, right leg. So he had to stay in the Củ Chi area in the bunker, medical bunker for 6 months. 6 months under the tunnel of the medical bunker. Dạ, còn ông thì sao ạ?
So to me, that kind of forgiveness is pretty astounding. I mean, it was just almost hard to fathom. I mean, it's coming from a Western perspective, but I think, given the quote from the three teachings and Thich Nhat Hanh's perspective, people in that culture really live that, and it was so impressive. Each moment is a chance for us to make peace with the world, to make peace possible for the world, to make happiness possible for the world. Thich Nhat Hanh. So, that's it. Happy to take questions, comments. I don't know how much time we have, but please.
lived in Flint, Michigan for 30 years, and during that time, and I was in the Unitarian Church, of course, and so my husband worked with a lot of Vietnamese refugees and helping them to make a place in America for them, you know, give them a home and things like that. So I really, and we got to know these people, and we were just blessed to be able to do that, or my husband did that.
Yeah. Are there questions, comments, or? So afterwards, we will we have some coconut rolls and some candies from Vietnam we brought, and some rambutan. No. Lychee. Okay. So we'll put those out with the coffee and such. So, question?
Just a comment. These kinds of teachings and what you witnessed is something we definitely need here. What we're going through now is not going to last forever, and we need to be able to have reconciliation with the many ICE personnel, some of whom are also victims of the administration. They're not being paid. I got an account that one had quit and gone back to Texas. He only took the job because he needed the health insurance because his daughter's ill. And after spending quite a bit of time with 8 other people in a single suite with just 2 king-size beds and no other facilities, they were afraid to go do their laundry, they were afraid to go outside, and then they weren't being paid, and there's no chain of command. So it's just, they're being ripped off just like everybody else. And I think it's important to get to know some of these people and see them as human beings rather than as an enemy. And what you're saying today really speaks to the need for that kind of reconciliation.
Yeah, I think one of the generals spoke with us, said, you know, our war was with your government, not with you. And that kind of.
So I was born in Vietnam as the war was ending, and so you know, our family went through the communist re-education and wealth relocation. Oh, up and down. Okay. So yeah, I was born in Vietnam, and you know, as the war was wrapping up there, and our family went through the, you know, communist re-education and wealth relocation. So, you know, we went from a middle-class family to poverty in pretty much instantly. But one of the things in Vietnam is that, you know, we were oppressed, loosely translated as we were oppressed by the Chinese for 2,000 years and colonized by the French for 100 years, but we still prevailed.
Yeah.
So, you know, but I have a lot of things running through my head right now, but, you know, at the same time, there's not enough time to say it.
Well, and maybe you could do another talk and tell us more. That would be great. So thank you. I hope I did a fair representation of our trip. I encourage anybody who's interested to go. You know, I think our trip was maybe $2,500 a person or something. I mean, it's a really long flight. It's like 16 hours you fly to Korea and then to. But if you have any interest, I was as an American growing up during the American War, we were pretty hesitant to go, unsure what kind of reception we'd have, and it was just so amazingly affirming of people's and culture's ability to have resilience and forgiveness. I was really impressed. So, thanks so much.
Thank you, Prescott. That was awesome. Now we will move ahead. We have so much to learn, don't we, from the rest of the world? So much to learn. We're not done yet. This can't be our last life. Okay. Should I play that? That's awesome. Thank you. And at UU, as you all know, we seek truth, we promote and support justice, and for the most part, we let the mystery be. So that's so fitting. Announcements coming up. As I said earlier, for the month of March, we'll be looking at paying attention. Next week, Ann and Don Leek will be back in town, and Ann and I will be kicking off the month with a very special surprise presentation that we haven't gotten done yet. But and then March 8th, the role of the observer. If you don't know Eileen Korenik is retired from UW River Falls, and she is just a font of knowledge and wisdom. And she's going to be with us sharing her perspective on the role of observer, since paying attention is our theme for the month. March 15th, we're going to have Reverend Chad Snyder back from Minnesota. He's a visiting minister, and he will be talking about Lent, what we give up, and talking about the Christian practice of Lent and how it has meaning to us in UU, may or may not. Again, should be interesting. With that, we have a basket in the back. We appreciate so many people being here today. This is great. And if you're interested in making a contribution, you can do so in the basket. You can do so online, but your presence is also your gift. So thank you for being here. We have coffee and treats in the kitchen. It's all gluten-free for anybody who cares. So please join us for treats and coffee and cake and conversation after the service. And then the last part of our tradition at UU is we gather in one large circle and we hold hands and we say our closing words, which are on the 2 burgundy banners. Are we ready? Almost. It's on the overhead, too. All right. Go out into the world in peace. Have courage. Question all things. Hold on to what is good. Return to no person evil for evil. Strengthen the faint-hearted. Support the weak. Help the suffering. Honor all beings. All right. Thank you.